The moon of Calphar hung shattered in space like a frozen scream. Its jagged remains floated in slow, majestic silence, encircling the orbital platform that housed the Galactic High Tribunal, a sanctified court car from obsidian and light, suspended over the debris of worlds long dead. Hey, in the sacred hall of judgment, crimes against the stars were tried and paid for. Inside the amphitheater of justice, thousands of delegates, magistrates, and syndicate observers watched from floating tiers, holographic runes pulsing concentric rings around the central dais. The air shimmered with tension, and frost gathered on the breath of the living. In the center stood Thorn, shackled at the wrists and ankles in graviton restraints. He floated 2 inches above the obsidian floor. His boots never touched the ground. Not anymore. His once vibrant blue uniform, now tattered and stained, hung off him like an afterthought. A dozen laser scars marred the visible parts of his skin. A cruel burn snaked across his jaw, barely healed. Yet his eyes still burned with rebellion. Inmate Thorn echoed the voice of Magistrate Kalaris, a 6-limbed elder with a face like cracked granite and eyes that glowed like twin suns. You stand accused of violating the Interstellar Peace Compact, Class Sigma. Charges include unauthorized military command, illegal use of neural warfare, destruction of a neutral biosphere, and the death of over 84,000 sentient beings. The silence that followed was not empty. It was sharp, electric, waiting. Kale didn't blink. He didn't twitch. He only replied, voice hoarse but steady. I saved them. They sent me to die, and I stopped the slaughter. They just didn't like how I did it. Gasps. A few hushed curses. One alien delegate fainted. You destabilized 3 systems, Kalaris snapped, slamming a scepter onto the rune table. You ignited the Valian Treaty's collapse and triggered mass desertions across 5 fleets. That's not heroism. That's anarchy. They sent civilians into a meat grinder to protect a trade corridor. Kale spat. I broke their machine. I'd do it again. From the observation tier above, hidden behind a force field of soundproof crystal, Dr. Ilara Thorne watched her son's trial unfold. Her hands were clasped behind her back, her breathing measured. She wore a long coat of grave silk, dark as the void, the collar high enough to shadow her eyes. Her face was unreadable, perfectly composed. But inside, beneath the skin, fire. That's my son down there. He had once fallen asleep on her shoulder, age 5, while she whispered stardust myths into his ear. He had once begged her not to let them take him to the academy. He had once kissed her goodbye before boarding the Dreadwing for his first command. Now, he stood condemned by the very leaders who created the war they punished him for ending. Kalaris raised a hand. This tribunal, with unanimous vote, sentences you to soul-fracturing, an irreversible process of dissection across mental, neural, and spiritual planes. You will not die. You will be broken. Your consciousness scattered, your memory fragmented, your very self unrecognizable across time. A harsh light bathed Kale. His face turned pale, his eyes wide, not in fear, but in anger. You're cowards, he growled. All of you, hiding behind words while others bleed. I did what you wouldn't. But the sentence was done. The runes flared. The verdict echoed across systems. In 10 hours, he would be taken to the Soul Prism on Frex Prime, the most secure mind severance facility in the known galaxy. As the chamber emptied, Ilara remained. She stood unmoving as a crystal shield lifted. No one noticed her. Not anymore. She had once been the galaxy's most promising synthetic biologist, a pioneer of quantum gene weaving and interdimensional embryology. Her creations had reshaped medicine, enhanced planetary adaptation, even halted plagues. But when the Syndicate discovered her work on human emotional dampening, the precursor to a theoretical zero-empathy soldier, they branded her a threat, a monster. They exiled her, silenced her, took her son into their system. Now, they had sentenced him to eternal mind-shattering, a punishment worse than death. She stepped into the shadows of the hole's exit tunnel, her boots making no sound against the magnetic flooring. A small drone hovered beside her, shaped like a black lotus. It beeped quietly and projected a retinal HUD. Vessel, Furiglaus, orbit acquired. Target, Soul Prism Detention Protocol active. Warden code, Avalanche locked, Requires unsealed authority. Next step, query confirmation. Ilara didn't hesitate. She touched the hologram. Her voice was cold, clear, unwavering. Proceed with Operation Frost. Hours later, across the frozen plains of post-cataclysmic Earth, beneath miles of reinforced ice, a crypt stayed, in an ancient vault built before the collapse wars, sealed by 11 layers of security protocols, some encoded with extinct languages and others requiring DNA signatures that no longer existed. Something began to wake. The air dropped to minus 200 degrees Celsius. Power flickered through long-dead circuits. A heartbeat, just one, echoed like a drum across the steel bones of the crypt. Tomb. A central chamber hissed as cryo steam escaped. Inside a cylinder of solid gel, surrounded by coils and containment rings, lay him, the Earthborn anomaly, a relic from the cold protocols, a thing so feared, so lethal, that entire government agreed to erase all mention of it. Project Avalanche. Code name, Frost Warden. Unlike other soldiers, he had not been trained. He had been engineered. His veins carried cryofluids denser than mercury. His muscles were grafted from biocarbon lattices reinforced with compressed glacial plates. His mind? Wiped clean, stripped of guilt, stripped of mercy, stripped of everything, except the ability to kill. Ilara's voice echoed into the chamber. Open your eyes. And he did. They snapped open, colorless, rimmed with frost, utterly devoid of warmth. She stepped forward, hair trailing like dark smoke behind her. I have a mission, she said. Not for glory, not for war, for vengeance. He didn't answer. He only sat up, steady, controlled. Cold steam billowed from his spine as armor plates clicked into place across his skin. She held up a hollow image of Kale, imprisoned, eyes closed, pain across every line of his face. That's my son. A moment passed. Then the Frost Warden whispered, voice like ice sliding over steel. Target acknowledged. Back in orbit, the Galactic Tribunal celebrated. The high judges toasted on crimson wines poured from planets burned to dust. Kolaris received a ceremonial blade forged from fallen satellite debris. They believed justice had prevailed. That no force, mortal or mythical, could touch them now. But they had forgotten the Earth. They had forgotten what it made. They had forgotten her, and what she was willing to unleash. Long before he had a name, he had a function. Terminate. Without mercy. Without emotion. He was born in silence, baptized in cold, and abandoned to the shadows beneath a dying earth. His creators called him a triumph. The Syndicate called him a mistake. The world called him a myth. The galaxy forgot him. Until tonight. The vault lay entombed beneath what remained of Siberia's ancient permafrost, 5 kilometers below ground, buried so deep, so deliberately, that even Earth's modern satellite grid had no record of its existence. No beacon, no signal, just endless silence in the dark. Until she came. Dr. Ilara Thorne stepped through the cryo-sealed chamber like a ghost wrapped in carbon steel. Her suit hissed softly as it compensated for the sub-zero temperatures, but her body had long since adapted. She didn't flinch as the cold bit into her bones. Her blood had run colder for years. The vault's inner chamber loomed ahead, a cathedral of rusted steel and frozen pipes. Icy stalactites hung from the ceiling like the fangs of gods. At the center, a massive cryo-core tank, its curved glass blackened with age and frost. She approached, one hand reaching for her pulse detonator. It had taken her 4 years to locate this place. 5 stolen ships, 6 betrayals, dozens dead. And for what? 1 weapon, 1 ghost, 1 war. She placed the detonator on the panel, pressed the trigger. Boom sit at HH. The cryo core hissed open like a beast exhaling its first breath in centuries. A wave of unnatural cold surged outward, crystallizing the moisture in the air. The force field shimmered. Lights flickered. The walls groaned. Inside the capsule floated a figure, humanoid, motionless, encased in a slow-churning gel the color of night snow. His skin glowed faintly pale blue beneath the fluid. His muscles were coiled with frozen tension, like a bow pulled to its last inch. Silver tubes laced his spine. His eyes were shut. He did not breathe. Not until she spoke. Frost Warden. Silence. You were made to end wars. A low rumble answered. The capsule shuddered. But now, you will wage one for me. A violent crack spiderwebbed across the cryoglass. Then another. With a high-pitched shriek, the tank exploded outward, sending shards of frozen glass screaming in every direction. A wave of cryo mist rolled across the chamber like a living blizzard. Ilara stood unmoved, watching. Through the haze, he stepped out, naked but for the frost forming across his body. Thin sheets of bio-eyes crawled over his muscles like armor knitting itself together. His breath misted like a dragon's snarl, and his eyes, colorless, rimmed with thin cracks of ice, opened slowly. He looked at her and said nothing. She raised her wrist. A hologram bloomed in the cold. Her son, Kale, bound in neural chains. Face bruised, eyes shut, lifeless. His name is Kale Thorn, she whispered. They sentenced him, broke him. You were made to stop monsters. So go. A long silence. Then the Frost Warden spoke, his voice like a glacier shifting. Define termination parameters. She smiled, just slightly. Begin with the tribunal. The judges in red. Make it personal. The orbital cruiser Furiglass rose from the broken crust of Earth like a silver ghost, hidden behind stealth shielding in a cloaking net. Designed for speed, built for infiltration, it pulsed with illegal tech and ghost drive calibration. A relic of the Black Fleet. At its helm, Ilara sat like a queen at her throne. The Frost Warden stood behind her in stillness, gazing at the stars beyond the viewport. She watched his reflection in the glass, marveling at him. No heartbeat, no warmth, no weakness. He was perfect, too perfect. She remembered the day she helped design him, the day they told her to destroy the project, the day she refused. They had called her unhinged. They hadn't understood what she was building, not a man, but a consequence. Their first stop, Outpost Lyra 7, deep in the Hydrax belt, a listening station, heavily guarded, shielded with psychic inhibitors and cloaked within synthetic asteroid, a communications hub, and a black site prison, one of the tribunal's hidden hands. They arrived without warning. No transmission, no diplomacy, no survivors. The Frost Warden moved through the station like a silent plague. The first guards didn't even know they were dead. His body phased between shadows, his skin adapting instantly to temperature, pressure, even light frequency. Energy weapons froze at impact. Kinetic rounds shattered against his frame. He tore through bulkheads with his fists, turned men into red mist with a single strike. A defense AI tried to lock him in a magnetic corridor. He flash-froze a reactor core and walked through the meltdown. In under 12 minutes, the entire station was gone, imploded under cryogenic pressure, fractured at the atomic level. All that remained, a single sentence carved into the wall with a frozen finger. This is for Kale Thorn. Back aboard the Furiglass, Ilara watched the destruction from orbit. Her fingers trembled, but not from fear, not even from thrill. It was satisfaction. Target eliminated, the warden said, his voice steady, indifferent. But Ilara noticed something in his tone. A shift, the faintest crack in the frost. Not emotion. Not yet, but perhaps intent. She moved to the war table and expanded the map. Red markers bloomed across the galaxy, each one a location tied to the tribunal. Secret courts, exile colonies, weapon caches, soul fracturing labs. Her voice darkened. Next, we hit the memory banks at Halex Prime. They hold my son's neural threads. They are starting the fracturing process. If we don't stop them, Kale dies. Forever. The Frost Warden didn't ask questions. He didn't blink. He simply turned toward the hangar. Ilara watched him go and whispered to herself, "They turned my son into a number. I'll turn their empire into ash." Meanwhile, in the halls of the Galactic Tribunal, panic began to creep like rot under polished skin. Reports were flooding in. Frozen bodies, vaporized stations, whispers of a ghost from Earth. Syndicate commanders argued over sensor logs showing impossible temperature drops, entire ships iced in seconds. No heat signatures, no transmissions, just death. The name Thorn kept appearing in recovered data fragments. Some dismissed it as a rogue AI. Others weren't so sure. Magistrate Kolari stared at a holo image of the Lyra 7 ruins, rage growing behind his ancient eyes. "This is terrorism," he hissed. "Find out who's behind this. Triple the guard on Frex Prime, if they come for the Soul Prison." "They will," whispered another judge. "And when they do," Kolari's thought, "we'll bury them so deep in the void not even memory will follow." But even he felt it, that chill down the spine. Not fear. Worse, recognition. In the engine room of the Furiglass, the Frost Warden stood before a flickering screen. On it, Kale Thorne's face, sleeping, caged in neural frost. Something in the Warden's mind stuttered. A flash of memory not his own. A soft voice, Ilara's voice, whispering in a cold lab. He won't feel pain. He won't feel guilt. But maybe someday, he'll understand. The Warden clenched his fist. Micro cracks spidered down the metal railing. No emotion, no mercy. But something was changing. Not a soul, not yet, but a purpose. And once the code has a purpose, not even gods can stop it. The soul prism of Frex Prime was never built to be breached. It was carved into the crust of the planet itself, surrounded by a fortress of quantum steel, gravitational inversions, and memory firewalls. Floating defense pylons orbited it like obedient demons, each equipped with psychic disruptors, antimatter torpedoes, and a fear protocol triggered the moment someone even thought about escape. No prisoner had ever left. No attacker had ever gotten close. Until now, high above Frex Prime's atmosphere, camouflaged against the black skin of space, the Furiglass held position. Inside the command chamber, silence reigned. Ilara stood at the viewport, her face lit only by the glow of distant lightning flickering across the prison moon. Her hands were clasped behind her back, stiff with restrained fury. Her heart ached with images of Kale, chained, helpless, his memories being ripped apart neuron by neuron. 10 more hours, and her son would be gone. Not just dead, erased, disassembled like data, turned into dust across dimensions. She turned to him. The Frost Warden stood in the center of the ship's grave-well chamber, his body suspended midair, locked in a pre-launch stasis field. The fluid armor had fused with his skin. His eyes were open, wide, unblinking, unreadable. "Ilara," he said, the first time he'd spoken her name. Her breath hitched. "Yes?" she asked, not daring to hope. He didn't move, but his voice was lower, slower. "I feel fragments." "What kind of fragments?" "I do not know, but when I see him, Kale," they stir. "I feel the thrust shift." She stepped closer. "Then hold on to that, whatever it is, because what comes next will test the last thing you have left." "Which is?" She met his gaze. Oblivion without him. They launched in silence. No war horns, no beacon, just descent. A black dot hurtling through the atmosphere, ripping clouds apart like knives through silk. The Furiglass pierced the anti-orbit defenses before the alarms could even sound. It deployed no landing gear. It crashed into the upper deck of the Soul Prism like a god's wrath, splitting steel and vaporizing corridors in a column of plasma. Screams echoed as security turrets unfolded like metal spiders, only to freeze, jam, and crack from sudden unnatural cold. The Warden emerged from the wreckage, steam rising from his back like rising souls. Guards rushed forward, neural whips snapping. He moved. No wasted motion. No theatrics. His fist connected with the first man's ribcage. Implosion. He caught a second by the face, gripped, and froze the skull from the inside out, then shattered it with a flick. Panic spread faster than orders. In the central monitoring station, Warden Overseer Revek barked into the intercom, sweat pouring down his neck. "Unleash the Apex Guard. Seal all layers. I want every sector." His command died in his throat. The glass wall beside him frosted over in less than 2 seconds. A hand burst through it and dragged him screaming through the glass like paper. Only bones were left. Deep in the lower vaults, Ilara navigated the map with a digital override, her gloved fingers dancing across terminal after terminal. Blood stained the floor beneath her boots. She didn't notice. "Kale's stasis unit is in sublevel 12, she whispered, voice vibrating. "Neural fracturing begins in 30 minutes. We have to move." But the Frost Warden didn't respond. He stood in the center of the hallway, unmoving. "Warden," she called. He stared down at a shattered reflective panel, not at himself, but at what he had done. The corridor behind him was painted in gore. Frost-covered bodies lined the walls like ornaments of death. Ice formed on their eyeballs, still wide in shock. A flash again, memories not his own. A child laughing, a boy saluting, a hand held during a thunderstorm. He turned toward Alara slowly. "I am remembering." She reached him, placed a hand against his icy shoulder. "You're becoming more than a weapon," she said. "But right now, I need you to be exactly what they fear." He nodded, and they descended into the dark. Sublevel 12 was a maze of spiral chrome and psychic noise. Screaming minds filled the air, not with sound, but with feeling. Every soul trapped in the prison's memory chambers cried out in fractured echoes, lost in loops of forgotten suffering. At the core, the soul severance chamber. It floated inside a zero-gravity cube of black glass. 10 operators in psi helmets chanted in synchronized breath. Runes glowed across their bodies. The air rippled with dimensional pressure. Kale Thorn floated above the cube, naked, arms wide, neural tethers linked to his spine. His memories projected around him in ghostly flickers. A dinner table, a kiss on his forehead, the day he graduated the academy, a battlefield, a dead friend, a scream, his mother screaming. His lips were moving, but no sound came. The lead operator activated the final fracturing rune. "One more phase," he whispered, "and he is no longer anyone." The wall exploded inward with a shriek of shattered time. The Frost Warden stepped through the fire. The operators toned, faces twisted in disbelief. They'd heard of him. Of course they had. The stories. The ice that walked like a man. But none of them had believed. Until he reached out, and the psi helmets cracked like eggs. One by one, they screamed as their minds were ripped apart. Not by fire, not by blades, but by a cold so absolute it touched their souls. Their bodies collapsed. Steam rose. Brains flash froze and exploded inside their skulls. The chamber flickered. Kale's body began to fall. Ilara ran. She caught him before he hit the floor. Cried out, collapsing with his weight. He was unconscious, but breathing. Ilara wept into his chest. "My boy, I'm here. I never stopped." The Frost Warden watched in silence. He stepped forward, reached out, and touched Kale's forehead. For the first time, his fingers trembled. A surge of something he couldn't name flooded him. Not warmth, but something deeper. Something breaking through the frost. Not a command. Not a protocol. A memory. And far above, as alarms screamed and syndicate fleets rushed toward Threx Prime's orbit, Magistrate Kalari stood before a shimmering holoscreen and watched the footage in growing horror. "It can't be," he whispered. Project Avalanche was destroyed. Another judge staggered into the chamber. "We just lost contact with Soul Prism. All signals dead." Kolaris turned toward the others, his voice shaking. "This isn't vengeance. This is the reckoning we buried. We built monsters to win our wars, and now one's come home." One by one, the others realized the truth, and none of them had time to flee. In the prison's final chamber, Ilara turned toward the warden, her face streaked with tears. "He's alive! You brought him back." The warden looked down at her, at Kale, at his own hand. "I remember," he said at last. She froze. "You remember what?" He looked up, voice rising, not cold, not robotic, but angry. "Who I was before they erased me." She stood, stunned. "You?" He nodded. "I was their first failure. Their prototype. They took everything. My name, my face, my soul." His hand clenched. "Now, I take theirs." The galaxy didn't scream. It froze. Words spread like infection, whispered between fractured data streams, smuggled through dying servers, painted in blood on ruined stations. The Frost Warden lives. He had no call sign, no allegiance, no weakness. He didn't speak in threats or terms. He simply arrived, unleashed hell, and left galaxies in ruin behind him. And now, He wasn't alone. 3 weeks after the destruction of the Sol Prism, the Galactic Tribunal's central ring, a citadel of judgment orbiting the binary suns of Devrak, received a gift. A star cruiser, drifting, derelict, no heat signature, no beacon, but clearly marked with the Tribunal's own crest. They pulled it into dock with caution and weapons drawn. Magistrate Belaron himself stood in the landing bay, flanked by elite guards, pulse rifles humming. His robes were heavy with tradition, his ring set with stolen moons. He sneered at the dead ship. A coward's message. He spat. The airlock hissed. Out drifted a body. Magistrate Valan, once head of planetary judgments. Now a corpse frozen solid, entirely intact. Not a bruise, not a burn, but his expression. Sheer, immortal terror. His eyelids were crystallized, Tays frozen mid-fall. His jaw locked open in an unending scream, pinned to his chest with an ice shard. Judgment comes for the judges. Belaron took a step back, and the ship exploded. Back aboard the Furiglass, Elara Thorn stood before a galaxy aflame. The war table map showed tribunal facilities blinking out, one by one. Soul banks collapsing. Data bunkers iced and erased. Political allies turning silent. Entire ruling branches cut off like gangrenous limbs. They're running scathed, Kale said from beside her, still recovering, thin, quiet, but alive. Elara turned to her son. I told you I'd come for you, she whispered. You did more than that, he replied. You woke him up. Across the bridge, the Frost Warden emerged from his meditation cell. His armor had changed. Sleeker now, sharper, more like a second skin of frozen vengeance. His body radiated unnatural cold. Entire systems aboard the ship compensated with emergency heating. But his eyes burned, not with fire, but memory and hate. He remembered now. Not everything, but enough. His name, once, was Jalen Ross, Earthborn, architect of the Tribunal's original Black Operations Unit, long before the courts went galactic, betrayed, erased, rebuilt in ice and obedience. They'd made him forget, strip by strip, nerve by nerve. But vengeance? That had survived the cryo sleep. Their next target wasn't just a facility. It was a sanctuary, one of the Tribunal's deepest bunkers, Obelisk Delta, hidden within the core of a gas giant. It held more than weapons. It held the origin archives, files, recordings, names, proof that the Tribunal's rise had been built on genocide, on artificial collapses, on lies told in golden halls, on the slavery of children, on wars manufactured for resource clearance, on Kale's sentencing, on Jalen's erasure, on Alara's banishment. Boning it wasn't enough. They had to show it to the galaxy first. The assault on Obelisk Delta began at midnight rotation. Fury Glass breached through atmospheric shielding at impossible velocity, firing cryopods like harpoons into the bunker's titanium skin. In moments, corridors were littered with frost blossoms, implosions of sudden permafrost that shattered walls and people alike. Jalen, no longer just a warden, led the charge, silent, precise, deadlier now, because he remembered what they took. Inside, the Tribunal's elite waited with desperation and overconfidence. The Eminent Guard, clad in fire armor and equipped with inferno blades designed to counter cold-based organisms. They were fast, lethal, burned oxygen in combat zones, fought like zealots. Jalen faced all 12 alone. The first came at him with a plasma spear. Jalen caught it mid-strike, let it pierce his side, then froze the entire weapon in its wielder's arm in a blink. Snap. Gone. The second tried to ignite a thermal grenade. Jalen condensed the air around it so violently the explosion turned inward, consuming the fool in a mini-implosion. The others began to hesitate. He didn't. He became the blizzard. He moved with speed that cracked visual tracking, smashed helmets into walls, froze blood in arteries before hearts even reacted. The final 3 guards tried to retreat. He didn't follow. He erased them with a wave of his hand. The corridor was white with frost and bone. Meanwhile, Elara and Kale descended into the archive vault. Inside the central data core, digital ghosts flickered. Holograms of mass slaughter. Secret court trials with forged evidence. Ilara's own research logs, proof of tribunal manipulation, and among them, the truth of Project Avalanche. Jalen's file, the original prototype, not defective, too aware, too human. Upload it all, Ilara said. Flood the darknet. Send it to every system, every pirate relay, every freedom cell. Kale hesitated. You sure you want the galaxy to know everything? She didn't blink. If we're going to burn this system down, we do it honestly. He nodded, and with a final keystroke, the flood began. Across the galaxy, truth ignited. Screens lit up in slums, in spires, in warships and pleasure hubs. News anchors went silent mid-broadcast as files replaced their feeds. The tribunal's glorious empire collapsed in public shame. In rebellion, back in the vault, alarms screamed. Missile lock, Kale said, reading the terminal. The tribunal's core fleet is descending. Ilara grinned. Let them come. Outside, the sky churned as black warships descended like hornets. The Fury Glass rose to meet them. Its cannons roared with Creole-lace fury, melting titanium hulls, freezing nuclear warheads in mid-flight, and impaling flagships with ice spears the size of towers. But there were too many, too fast. One of the tribunal dreadnoughts breached the vault's upper levels. Kale pulled his mother down behind cover. Fire rained down. Jalen stepped into the blast zone. He didn't flinch. The flames kissed his body and extinguished themselves. He walked forward, slowly, relentlessly, through steel-melting fire. His voice echoed like winter thunder. Your judgment is void. Your court is dust. I sentence you to erasure. And then he leapt, straight into the heart of the dreadnought. 30 seconds later, it exploded in a shockwave of ice and thunder. The remaining tribunal fleet broke ranks. They ran. Ilara, Kale, and Jalen returned to the Fury Glass. Blooded, burned, but unbroken. Across systems, worlds began to rise. Tribunal statues torn down. Hidden prisons liberated. Exiled scientists reinstated. Children once labeled defective, now held as symbols of resistance. But the war was far from over. 1 week later, Jalen stood alone at the edge of a frozen moon, staring at the stars. Ilara approached him slowly. You were more than a weapon, she said softly. I was once a man, he replied. Then I was their tool. And now? He looked at her, his eyes no longer hollow, still cold, but focused. Now I'm consequence. She smiled, tired, but genuine. Where do you go from here? He looked at Kale in the distance, helping refugees board a skimmer. Then back to the void, wherever judgment still lives. She nodded. Then we'll meet again. No, he said. He stepped onto his transport, a shadow disappearing into night. You will hear of me in what remains. And with that, he was gone. There were no more courts, no more robes, no declarations or deliberations. The tribunal was dust, burned from its ivory towers and data holes. Its lies turned to ash and scattered across galactic channels, buried in the blood and breath of revolution. But one name remained, Magistrate Adjudicator Thalzireth. Not a man, not exactly. He was a last of the Immortal Nine, genetically sealed, psychically shielded, kept alive through soul mirror cloning and quantum cognition. While others ruled systems and broke laws, Thalzireth wrote them. Every purge, every engineered collapse, every child harvested for memory weaving, his signature etched beneath each. He was the source, the mind behind the tribunal's machine, and he had vanished the moment the collapse began. But he wasn't hiding. He was preparing. Above a dying blue sun in the Lurix Nebula, a station appeared. Not registered, not traceable. It seemed to exist outside of all known or trusted math. The Omnispire, a fortress built in folds of space. Time ran differently here, slower, heavier. It had no windows, no doors, no heat, only judgment. And inside it, Thalzireth stood alone. He watched through a neural interface as systems fell, one by one. They are insects, he muttered, voice like dry snow sliding across bone. And yet they bite. He pressed a hand to the wall. It responded with living circuits. Initiate the Gaunt Protocol. he commanded. Open the god cell. Below, in a vault that had not been unsealed in 2 centuries, something ancient awakened. It screamed without lungs. Back aboard the Furiglass, Elara watched the dead sector go black. No transmissions. No survivors. No light. Jalen, she said, eyes narrowing. He started his final move. Jalen Ross, the Frost Warden no more, stood motionless. The cold around him had deepened, like a winter that had found its true voice. Even the ship adjusted. Steel groaned, coolant systems failed. His presence pulled temperature from memory itself. I know where he is, Jalen said. Kale looked up from the console. That farce. Jalen didn't answer. Instead, he lifted his hand, and a fragment of space twisted open, revealing coordinates too deep for scanners. Burned into his DNA, a memory sealed during his final tribunal induction, back when he was nothing but an experiment. The Omnispire, Elara whispered. You're sure? I don't need to be, Jalen replied. I can feel him, calling me. Kale's face tightened. Then we end it. They reached the station 3 days later, and everything went wrong. The moment they entered orbit, the Furiglass lost navigation. Time hiccuped. Clocks ran backward. Gravity twisted. Hull panels snapped like bone under pressure. Pull back. Elara barked. Too late. A pulse fired from the Omnispire. Not a weapon, not light, but judgment. And suddenly, Jalen vanished. He awoke in darkness. No suit, no armor, just flesh. Cold, but not his own. He stood in a chamber built of thoughts, twisting shadows etching symbols he'd never learned but somehow remembered. He was naked, surrounded by echoes, whispers of the Tribunal's earliest experiments, fragments of other lives, failure after failure. At the center, Thalzireth. His form was tall, skeletal, but his presence, godlike, cloaked in layers of shifting armor that blinked in and out of physicality. You should not exist, the magistrate said. You made me, Jalen replied. No, Thalzireth smiled. I made the cage. You forged a monster that escaped it. Jalen stepped forward, fists clenched. I remember it all. I know, Thalzireth said. That's why you're here. Not to kill me, but to decide. Outside, Elara and Kale breached the station's outer rim, surrounded by shifting walls that refused to obey physics. Turrets that screamed in languages no longer spoken fired at them. They dodged, ducked, detonated paths forward. The ship had been left behind. This was a suicide mission, but Elara had long made peace with death. What mattered was finishing this. Inside the mind chamber, Thalzireth opened his arms. It is your choice, Jalen Ross. You end me, and take my place. Or you fail, and return to your frozen myth. Jalen's eyes narrowed. I don't want your throne. You don't have a choice. A spike of black energy shot from the ground, straight into Jalen's chest. He screamed, not from pain, but from recognition. This was the God Cell, the original core that had made the Tribunal possible. The seed of judgment, fed on suffering, empowered by control. It was burrowing into him, trying to rewrite his will. And for a moment, it worked. Kale reached the inner chamber, but stopped cold. Jalen was there, suspended midair, arms spread, spine arched backward, eyes white with fire and frost. Elara screamed. No! Thalzireth stood beside the God Cell, hands raised. I gave you power, he intoned. Now you'll become order itself. But something snapped. The frost didn't retreat. It multiplied. Jalen's scream turned into a growl, then a roar, then silence. And when he opened his eyes, Thalzireth staggered. Not because he was attacked, but because the God Cell was freezing. No, the magistrate whispered. You're resisting it. I'm not resisting, Jalen said slowly. I'm reprogramming it. He lowered himself to the ground, frost blossoming beneath his feet. He stepped forward, calm, unblinking. You use it to erase names. I will use it to remember them all. Thalzireth fired a bolt of mind fire. Jalen caught it, crushed it. Your judgment, he said, has expired. And then he reached into the core of the god cell and ripped it in half. The Omnispire didn't explode. It imploded, like a dying star drinking its own lies. Kale and Alara were thrown back, then caught by the last working auto-teleporter. They rematerialized on the Fury Glass, bodies scorched, lungs screaming. "Where's Jalen?" Kale shouted. Before Alara could answer, the stars shifted, and Jalen appeared on the deck. But different, no longer covered in armor, no longer burning cold. He looked human again, weathered, strong, but his eyes held galaxies. The god cell's residue still lingered, reformed into something new, something better. He walked past them, toward the viewport. "The tribunal is dead," he said. Kale stood beside him. "And what are you now?" Jalen took a breath, then exhaled frost and fire at once. Not vengeance, not judgment, memory. In the years that followed, Jalen vanished again. No one knew where. But whispers remained. Whole systems once locked in tribunal dogma thawed under unknown intervention. Ships appeared beside drifting wrecks and returned their names. Statues appeared on dead moons. Children lost to the tribunal, named at last. And when Alara Thorne died of old age, her son Kale returned to Earth. On her grave, written in clean stone, she didn't send a killer. She sent a man they tried to erase. And he remembered her.